The biting February wind howled through the streets of South Philadelphia, rattling windows and sending loose papers tumbling down the sidewalks. Joey Coyle tightened his worn jacket around his shoulders, his breath visible in the cold night air. Life had never felt more uncertain. At 28 years old, Joey had spent most of his life working the docks, unloading cargo, hauling crates, hard labor that wore a man down. But now, even that was gone. A layoff notice had stripped him of the little stability he had left. Jobs were scarce, and the weight of unemployment pressed heavily on his shoulders. The world moved on, indifferent to his struggles. Bills piled up at home. His mother, a woman of quiet resilience, watched with concern as Joey sank deeper into frustration. He wasn't just worried about himself. He had family, friends, people who depended on him. But what could he do? The docks weren't hiring, and as the days passed, desperation gnawed at him like a hungry wolf. That evening, he sat in his car with his friends, John Balow and Jed Pennock, the three of them making their usual rounds. There was nowhere special to be, nothing urgent to do. Just another night in a city that never seemed to notice them. As they cruised down Swanson Street, Joey drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, his mind adrift. That was when he saw it. Two large canvas bags, lying there on the road as if they had been dropped from the sky. He slowed the car. What the hell is that? Balow and Pennock turned their heads. The bags were heavy, bulky. Something about them felt off. Joey pulled over, his pulse quickening. The three men stepped out cautiously, the cold air sharp against their skin. As they drew closer, Joey's eyes widened. Stamped in bold letters across the bags were three words: FEDERALRESERVEBANK. He looked at his friends. No one said a word. And then, slowly, Joey reached down and unzipped the first bag. What he saw inside made his breath hitch in his throat. Joey Coyle's hands trembled as he reached into the open canvas bag. Crisp, neatly stacked bundles of $100 bills stared back at him, their edges sharp, untouched. The weight of the discovery sent a surge of adrenaline through his veins. His friends, John Balow and Jed Pennock, stood frozen in shock. The night suddenly felt different, charged, electric. Joey unzipped the second bag. More cash. A fortune. His mind raced. This wasn't a few stray bills lost on the sidewalk. This was a staggering amount of money, and it belonged to the Federal Reserve. He looked around. The street was eerily empty. No sirens, no shouts. No one had seen them. Balow shifted uneasily. "Joey, we can't just—" "Do you see anyone looking for it?" Joey cut in, eyes locked on the money. Pennock exhaled, shaking his head. "This is crazy." But Joey was already zipping up the bags. He wasn't thinking about consequences, not yet. All he could see were the endless possibilities. This money could change everything. No more unemployment, no more scraping by, no more watching life pass him like a train he could never board. He hauled the bags into the trunk of his car, his heart hammering. "We need to go. Now." No one argued. As they sped away, the weight of their decision settled over them, the realization of what they had just done. But in Joey's mind, this wasn't theft. This was fate, a gift dropped from the sky, and he wasn't about to give it back. The street behind them faded into the distance, dark and silent. But what they didn't know was that the money's rightful owners were already looking for it. Joey Coyle gripped the steering wheel as he sped through the streets of South Philadelphia. His pulse pounded in his ears. In the trunk of his car sat two heavy canvas bags filled with something that could change his life forever. $1.2 million in cold, hard cash. His friends, John Balow and Jed Pennock, sat in tense silence. None of them spoke, but the weight of what they had just done filled the air. It wasn't until they reached Joey's house that reality hit. Joey swung open the trunk, grabbed one of the bags, and staggered inside. He dumped the contents onto the floor. Stacks upon stacks of $100 bills tumbled out, spilling over like a waterfall of wealth. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then Joey laughed, a wild, breathless laugh. "Can you believe this? We're rich." Behlao ran a hand through his hair. "Joey, this is bad. That money belongs to somebody." "Yeah," Pennock added, "and they're gonna come looking for it." Joey's grin faltered, but only for a second. "Nobody saw us take it. Nobody knows we have it." He grabbed a handful of bills and held them up. "Think about it. No more worrying about rent, no more crap jobs. We can finally live." The temptation was overwhelming. It was more money than they had ever seen in their lives. But reality was creeping in. Behlao and Pennock weren't so sure about this. They knew something Joey wasn't willing to admit yet. Money like this doesn't just go missing without consequences. That night, Joey started handing out cash like candy. He stuffed money into his pockets and walked around the neighborhood, giving away hundreds, even thousands of dollars to friends, family, even strangers. He tipped a bartender $100 just for pouring a drink. He paid off debts. He bought gifts. It felt intoxicating. For the first time in his life, Joey was the guy with money. But with every bill that left his hands, a bigger problem grew. How do you spend over $1 million without attracting attention? That question would come sooner than he expected. Because just across town, the police were already piecing together the mystery of the missing money. And they were getting closer. Joey Coyle woke up the next morning feeling invincible. The money was still there, stacks of crisp $100 bills piled in his small house, the air thick with the scent of ink and fortune. He had spent the night handing out cash, playing the part of a modern-day Robin Hood. Friends, family, even random people at the bar had walked away richer because of him. He wasn't just some unemployed longshoreman anymore. He was the guy who had struck gold. But what he didn't know was that trouble was closing in. At the Philadelphia Police Department, Detective Pat Lorenzi sat at his desk, staring at a case that made no sense. $1.2 million had vanished from a Purolator Armored Services van. Just gone, as if the street had swallowed it whole. The bags had fallen out due to a faulty latch, but there were no witnesses, no suspects, no leads. That kind of money doesn't just disappear. Someone had taken it, and Lorenzi was determined to find out who. He started combing through security footage, witness reports, anything that could provide a clue. Then, a break, a vehicle description. A few people near Swanson and Porter Streets had seen a car pull over that night. A car that matched the one Joey had been driving. Lorenzi's gut told him they were close. Whoever had that money wouldn't be able to keep it quiet for long. Meanwhile, Joey's reckless spending wasn't going unnoticed. People were talking, whispering in bars, in street corners, in small neighborhood shops. "Did you hear? Joey Coyle's throwing around stacks of cash." "He ain't got a job. Where's he getting that kind of money?" Word spread fast, and it reached the wrong ears. Joey knew he needed a plan. Spending cash was one thing, but laundering it? That was a different game. That's when he turned to Carl Massey. Massey was no ordinary friend. He had connections, the kind that operated in the shadows. If anyone could help move this money without raising alarms, it was him. Joey met with Massey, explaining his situation in hushed tones. Massey's expression darkened. "This isn't small time, Joey. That's Fed money. You can't just spend it." Joey's confidence wavered for the first time. Masi told him about Mario Ricobene, a name that carried weight in Philadelphia's underworld. Ricobene was a known figure in the Philadelphia crime family, someone who could make large amounts of money disappear. Desperate, Joey handed over $400,000, hoping Ricobene could clean it through casino play in Las Vegas. But mobsters don't do favors for free, and Joey had just stepped into dangerous territory. Back at the police station, Detective Lorenzi received another tip. One of Joey's friends had talked. The investigation was moving fast now. Joey had no idea that his time was running out, and the people he had just trusted with his money, they might not be on his side. Joey Coyle paced back and forth in his small South Philly home, his mind racing. The money was supposed to change everything, to free him from the life of dead-end jobs and struggle. But now, it felt like a noose tightening around his neck. He had made mistakes. Too many people knew. Too much cash had been thrown around. And the worst part? He had trusted the wrong people. The Philadelphia police were closing in fast. Joey didn't know that his friends, John Bailow and Jed Pennock, had already turned themselves in. The guilt had been too much, the pressure too great. They walked into the police station, told the whole story, and gave Joey up. Detective Pat Lorenzi now had everything he needed: a description, a timeline, and a name. Joey Coyle wasn't just a suspect anymore. He was a wanted man. Joey had one chance left. He needed to disappear. The thought of going to prison made his stomach turn. He wouldn't survive behind bars. He called Carl Masi, hoping for advice. But Masi was done helping. The mob had no interest in protecting Joey Coyle. That's when Joey made a desperate decision. He was going to Mexico. With the last of his cash, $105,000, he bought a ticket to Acapulco. He figured if he could just get on that plane, he'd be untouchable. No cops, no questions, a new life. He shoved the money and headed for John F. Kennedy International Airport. But what Joey didn't know was that the police were already watching him. March 3rd, 1981. Joey stepped into the airport, his heart hammering in his chest. Every step felt heavier. Every glance from a stranger made his stomach tighten. He walked up to the gate, his hands sweating. Just a few more minutes, and he'd be free. But then, "Mr. Coyle?" A hand clamped down on his shoulder. He turned. Detective Lorenzi stood behind him, badge in hand. It was over. Joey barely had time to react before officers swarmed in, dragging him away from the gate. As they searched him, they found the money stuffed inside his boots. The dream was gone. The modern-day finders keepers story had just come crashing down. And now, all Joey could do was face what was coming next. Joey Coyle sat in a cold interrogation room, his hands cuffed in front of him. The weight of his actions had finally caught up with him. Just days ago, he had been on top of the world, throwing around stacks of cash, feeling untouchable. Now, he was just another criminal in police custody. Detective Pat Lorenzi watched him from across the table. "Joey, what were you thinking?" Joey let out a bitter laugh. "I thought it was my lucky day." But luck had nothing to do with it anymore. He was facing serious charges: theft, conspiracy, and receiving stolen property. If convicted, he could spend the next 7 years in prison. As the trial began, the media latched onto Joey's story. An unemployed longshoreman finds $1.2 million on the street. What would you do? Some saw him as a criminal. Others saw him as a folk hero, a man who had taken a once-in-a-lifetime chance and run with it. His defense attorney played on that idea. They argued that Joey hadn't acted out of greed, but out of desperation, that he wasn't a thief. He was a man caught up in the fantasy of an impossible opportunity. And then the final gamble, a plea of temporary insanity. The jury listened, they weighed the evidence, and then, against all odds, they acquitted him. Joey walked out of the courtroom a free man, but freedom didn't mean escape. Despite avoiding prison, Joey Coyle couldn't outrun his demons. The money had come and gone, but the damage had been done. His reckless spending had burned bridges. His betrayal by friends had left scars, and his deepening methamphetamine addiction only pulled him further down. In the years that followed, his life spiraled. His story was told in newspapers, on television, and eventually in a 1993 film, Money for Nothing, starring John Cusack. But Joey wouldn't live to see it. On August 15, 1993, just weeks before the movie's release, Joey Coyle took his own life. The man who had stumbled upon a fortune, who had tasted the thrill of instant wealth, was gone. Joey's story still fascinates people to this day. Some see it as a cautionary tale. Money that isn't yours will always come back to haunt you. Others see it as a tragic story of a man who was given a ticket to a new life, but never knew how to use it. One thing is certain, Joey Coyle's finders keepers moment changed his life forever. And in the end, it cost him everything.